I'm Lyn Christenson, and I'm a career and transitions coach, but perhaps more relevant to this audience is that I spent 25 years running communications for life sciences companies, including the one down the road at Applied Biosystems. One of my jobs while I was there was running global PR for mapping of the human genome. And in those days, it cost over $1 million to map the first genome. Today, it costs about $1,000. And there were many, many cycles of innovation getting from the $1 million genome to the $1,000 genome. Those cycles are inevitable in our industry. And people who manage the change and opportunity that comes from those cycles do so with two tools, which all of you have. One is your professional expertise, and the other is your network. And a story really hits home for me in this regard, which is from outside of life science. Sandra Day O'Connor was the first woman justice appointed to the Supreme Court. And when she graduated from Stanford Law School in 1952, she applied to 40 law firms. In those days, no one was hiring women attorneys, unlike King and Spalding today. So she received refusals from each of these firms. She, however, in the course of her networking, had met the district attorney for San Mateo County, this county. And he told her that he really needed a new attorney, but he did not have the budget for it and would not have budget for at least 6 months. But she said, well, I need a job, you need an attorney, so I'll work for you for free. And even more, I will share an office with your secretary, if the secretary is agreeable. Well, she was, so that's what happened. Sometime later, the DA got the budget and hired her. And the rest, as they say, is history. But this brings home for me two lessons. One is that she was very persistent. And two, she did not give up. And that, for me, is the lesson for all of us in biotechnology. Last year, I gave a talk to a women's group in science, not unlike this one, not Women in Bio. And in the Q&A period, two things happened that really made an impression on me. One was that a young woman in the back of the room, who was 30 or so, said during the question and answer period, I really want to apply to law school, but I can't talk about it to my friends and colleagues at work because all of them will think that I think I'm better than they are. And another woman in the audience who was 50 plus said, I work in an academic lab and I've worked there for 15 years and I still cannot speak up in meetings and make myself heard. No one pays attention to me and I'm stuck. And I see the end of my career coming and I really don't know what to do to make it better. Those two things happened within about a 10-minute period to me, and it occurred to me that we as women have a really big challenge in terms of realizing our own potential and realizing that all of us as we come together can be very powerful as a network. So for that reason, I was delighted to receive the chance to talk to you this evening. I wanted also to say that if you are at a pivot point in your career right now, you've picked a very good time because this is one of the hottest markets in financing in biotech in the last 30 years. Those of the folks here who work at Amgen or Onyx know this because in the last couple of weeks, those two companies have come together in roughly a $10 billion or so merger. The folks down the road where Elon used to be added another $8 billion or so to the pot. So in this year alone, once Elon closes, there will be $20 billion in value that has been created by two mergers within, 5 miles of this building. There have been $2.5 or so billion raised by IPOs so far this year, and it's the hottest sector in the IPO market. As those of you who've been around biotech know, this is not always the case in biotech. In many cases, our industry is in the dumper. So this is a very, very good time for all of you if you are contemplating making some type of career change. When I think about what the pivot points are that I've seen over the course of my career, I find that they fall into roughly 3 decades, and I'll simplify it by saying that. The first pivot point can come around 30 years of age, and that one I call, you better shop around. What happens to you around that period of time? Well, you typically are through college and undergraduate. There may be a couple of tracks for scientific folks. One is you've gotten a PhD, and you're finished with that and in your first job or two. Another is you've gotten a bachelor's degree, you've come into a company and you've discovered that, oh, by the way, if I want to really get ahead in this company or this industry, I'm going to have to get that PhD. So that's kind of a decision point that you reach. You've had a few jobs, a few bosses, some good, some bad. You almost certainly have seen the results of some up and down cycles in either your own company or the industry at large. Some companies have gone under, some projects have been canceled. You are realizing that the industry you are in is a little bit of a roll of the dice. The questions you might like to ask yourself at that point in your career are these. What do I like to do? What do I not like to do? I have a number of folks who've talked to me over the years, and the conversation's gone something like this. I spent 10 years in college after high school, and I hate the bench. Hate it. Can't stand the thought of working there another day. Or, I love the bench, but they're pushing me towards management. I really don't want to supervise people. I just want to do science. But in my company, that is not the route to the top. I like big companies. I hate big companies. Small companies are exciting, but big companies are more stable. And oh yeah, by the way, what are my personal goals? I want to get married. I've just gotten married. I want to have kids, not sure about kids, and so on. So there's a lot of different avenues that one can pursue. These all sort of tend to come together in a big stew that's boiling around this period of time. My advice to people is shop around. Say yes to a lot of opportunities that may come your way, because unless you try on a pair of shoes, the truth is you're not going to know if it fits. I find often that you have opportunities that you can dip your toe in the water on a new type of job without going all the way to choosing that as a full-time job. For example, you may have an opportunity to be the scientific member of a team that's looking at a new acquisition, or the scientific member of a team that's working on a deal with a large partner. That gives you a couple of interesting things. Exposure to a new team of people in law, business development, and so on. It gives you also exposure to senior levels in the R&D group that you might not otherwise have. So those are opportunities to think about and take advantage of if they come your way. If you fast forward to age 40, situation can change. I call that welcome to work-life balance. But forget the future, I'm just trying to get through the day. Very often if you are married, you have a couple of children. They are in a very demanding period in their life. They're in elementary or middle school. They're demanding of you personally. Their school is demanding. Their sports teams are demanding. Just there's lots of things happening in your life that pull you away, your attention away from your job. At work, you may be realizing things such as, after my last review, my boss is probably not going to promote me. She just doesn't like me that much, or she's not an expert in analytical biochemistry, which is my field. Not really, but I'm making that up. And, she doesn't get ABC, so, she's not going to really appreciate the value that I bring. So I'm not going to get promoted in this woman's department. We have a new head of R&D, and he doesn't come from my field either. So he's probably going to decrease the funding. I've also just learned that our company recently our company bought into another company in Ireland. And I've had a chance to go and visit there a couple of times and be involved in those activities. I thought that sounded great and really exciting until my first couple of trips over there in coach from San Francisco. Not so much. Moving to another lab is a possibility, but the opening that I know about in the building next door to me requires that I travel to our new lab in Singapore, just the same as Ireland, just in the other direction. So the questions that now come up for you are, do I want to proceed in science, or do I want to go in the other direction? Do I, for example, want to go to law school? Do I, for example, want to go to business school? A colleague of mine at my last company worked as the lead on a couple of projects where she was the scientific advisor to partnerships, and she ultimately left the company and went to business school because she discovered that that was where her future aptitude and love really was. So you're characterized by several things at this period of time. One is you're reaching a position of responsibility in a specialized area. But the downside of that is you may have specialized to the extent that your skills in other areas may atrophy. You've seen some products and some deals blow up. You know that this is a fact of life in biotechnology. You're likely to have started a family and you're balancing dual responsibilities. Your compensation is rising. So supporting the lifestyle that you have begun to assume has become a requirement. Okay? So questions you might want to ask at this point are, where do I want to be in 5 years? And am I on track to get there? Am I willing to work at a job that requires me to travel to Ireland or Singapore for a finite period of time if I can see the next step after that? Am I willing to do the work required to change companies, which is not necessarily the easiest thing in the world? What would I do if my company or my project was shut down or sold? What would be my options? Okay. So things to consider there are a couple. One is give yourself permission to make a change, to change your mind. What else in your life is the same as it was when you were 18? That's a question I often ask clients who are a little resistant to this. Also think about re-entry is hard. There's been a lot of press lately about women wanting to re-enter who have opted out. There was a big New York Times story about this about 5 years ago, got lots of press, about women who opted out and were astonished, shocked, that they couldn't walk right back into a partnership at Ernst & Young 10 years after having left the workforce. Now, to be fair to EY, and other similar firms, they are actively now beginning to realize that partners who walk out the door at 32 are taking a lot with them, and it's very expensive to the partnership to retrain people. Nevertheless, it is impossible to walk back in 10 years later with nothing. So those are some of the considerations you might have at this point. These transitions are predictable. One can plan for them. The scenarios I've outlined are not necessarily always going to happen to you in exactly this way, but some version of them is likely to happen to many people. And so what I have learned over the years is that it is much better to look forward 5 years and begin asking these questions than to get to that 5-year point and wish that you had. And I'll give you one great closing example. A very close friend of mine had gone through 3 startups, and each of them had been sold. And she was tired of putting everything into those startups and then one day having it be over. Today, she is executive director of a nonprofit in cardiovascular research, and she has the opportunity to see personally, close up through their affiliation with UCSF, the benefits of the work that she is doing. And so she's married her experience in life sciences with her experience in finance to create a role for herself that is really personally more meaningful and is also extremely important to the field of science that she's in. So I use this as an example of someone who successfully reinvented herself in a career close to what she had before, but with substantially more individual meaning.